Welcome to This Week in Christian History, a podcast from the Center for Christian History at Mississippi College. The Center for Christian History is dedicated to expanding knowledge and understanding of Christian history. Our mission is to provide a scholarly, unbiased look at the events, figures, and movements that have shaped Christianity over the centuries. You can visit centerforchristianhistory.com for daily historical highlights. And each week on this podcast, we'll do a deep dive into key moments with Christian history's leading authorities. First up on our list of historical highlights for the week is J. Gresham Machen's address at Westminster Theological Seminary's first session of classes. After trying to prevent Princeton from becoming more liberal in its theology, Machen formed the new seminary in Pennsylvania. On September 25, 1929, he addressed the first 50 students and guests with the words, quote, "No, my friends, though Princeton Seminary is dead, the noble tradition of Princeton Seminary is alive. Westminster Seminary will endeavor by God's grace to continue that tradition unimpaired." End quote. Next up on our list, and the subject of our deep dive, is Lancelot Andrewes, whose resume was unrivaled during the reigns of Queen Elizabeth I and King James I of England. Andrewes authored Private Prayers, a devotional that has been in print for centuries. His most notable role was as director of the Hampton Court Conference that developed the King James Version of the Bible. Andrewes died on September 26, 1626. Last up on our list of historical highlights for the week is the official recognition of the Society of Jesus, also known as the Jesuits, by Pope Paul III on September 27, 1540. The society had been founded by Ignatius of Loyola in 1534. Jesuits come from all walks of life and take vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. Today in our deep dive, Nick Walters, director of the Center for Christian History, talks with David Norton about Lancelot Andrewes.
Hello and welcome again to another episode of This Week in Christian History, and we are exploring yet again another facet of the many components and pieces and parts that make up Christian history. We're focusing on this week, the week of September 22nd. Our episode is focused on September 26th, which is the death date of Lancelot Andrewes. And Andrewes had a leading role in the development of the authorized version, right, that we commonly know as the King James Version of the Bible. And we are glad to have a Professor Emeritus here, Professor David Norton, who was, I guess, your Emeritus status is Victoria University at Wellington. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. Long retired.
Long retired, all the way down in New Zealand. So I'm pleased to say that you are our first New Zealander to be able to be a guest for us. So thank you for getting up early this morning to record this.
Oh, my privilege.
Absolutely. So tell us a little bit, just kind of an overview of some things that you either want to talk about how the development maybe of the King James Version of the Bible came together, and James's ideas of dinging the bell, if you will, and calling the crew together, and maybe how it was organized, and then maybe some of it as well of what we know about Andrewes.
Okay. Well, Andrewes really is central figure in the initiation of the King James. We don't know a great deal, or at least I don't know a great deal about him other than that, but he it was who came to a conference called the Hampton Court Conference, where King James was trying to bring together, I think, the various factions of his new kingdom.
Mm-hmm.
And so there were Puritans there. Andrewes himself is basically on the Puritan side. And in the middle of the conference, second day, he made, apparently out of the blue, a proposal to have a new translation of the Bible. We don't know for sure whether this was a plant or whatever, but what he said was, I can give you some of the details of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've got so many pieces of paper here that I won't find the right one. But the proposal was that there needed to be a new translation of the Bible or revision, because the old ones in use were not satisfactory. Now, background to this is that at this time, there were two Bibles basically being used in England if we leave the Roman Catholics out.
Okay.
One was the Bishop's Bible, which was the Bible approved of for the church. So this was the one in churches, it was the one the clergy used, but it had a rival, a very successful rival, the Geneva Bible, which was in an easier typeface, had lots of information in it, which people were very much looking for. And so it was the one used by the people, and particularly by the Puritan section. So it was more left-wing as opposed to establishment. And I think one of the main issues was to try and see which side won. Now, Andrewes says, all right, there are problems with the Bible as we have it. And he named particularly 3 texts which were all wrong in the latest authorized Bible. They were wrong there, but if anybody looked around, they would see, they're correct in the Geneva Bible. Okay, let's have the Geneva Bible. Let's assume that was his intention. Now, James had already been involved with Bible translation. 10 years earlier, roughly, there'd been a proposal to have a new Bible in Scotland. And
where he was king, right? I mean, just as where he had been king and was not king of England yet, right? So
James VI of Scotland. And so he set up a movement to have a new version of the Bible. And it was sort of similar to the way the eventual King James Bible got set up. He liked appearing as a scholar. He thought it would, in fact, make him renowned and remembered. This was suggested to him at that time. The only actual outcome of it was a version of some of the singing psalms, which James himself contributed. And the only one actually that was authorized by a king for use by the people. It was authorized by his son, Charles I.
I mean, I didn't know that. Okay.
Well, it's a pretty rare thing. But anyway, when this proposal came up, he knew exactly what to say. He knew exactly what he thought. He loved the idea. And think about it politically. He could turn it to the church, because the church and king had to align. So he said, the Geneva is basically the worst of all the Bibles. He didn't like it. It even suggested that a wicked king might be executed, which was a bit prescient of him, what happened to his son.
About to say, not him, but there's somebody at the
It's
at
there
his knee, right, that ought to be worried a little bit. Right?
Yes. People might legitimately rebel against a king, according to some of the notes in the Geneva Bible. You can see the kind of context that would give. But he loved the idea of having a translation, a new version. If I can find the actual words, it'd be nice to hear what was said.
Well, let me ask this, if I may, but as you're thinking through that, my understanding was, or the thing about the Geneva Bible were really those commentaries and notes that were there, because again, people had come out of decades and decades of not necessarily having the Bible in their hand for them to read on their own, and so sometimes, just like today, somebody may be trying to interpret Ephesians 1, and you're really trying to figure out what is Paul exactly talking about here, right? So commentaries are helpful, even back in those times, but some of those commentaries, as I understand it, and please correct me if I'm wrong about this, the reason it's called the Geneva Bible is when it was put together during the reign of Bloody Mary, and Calvin and others wanted to throw some extra political components in there of kind of making their points as well. I mean, it wouldn't mean that they weren't interpreting it in some way, but they didn't mind being able to show this particular point if it helped to. So I think one example that I have always heard about or recall was about the midwives who delivered Moses, right? And that one of the comment, and so basically they just did not do what Pharaoh said, but they did what was right. And so that kind of an idea that, well, you can go around the king and go around the leader if you're doing what you're right. People like James are like, we don't need any of that in the official language. I mean,
that was one of the texts that Andrewes cited, that particular one, and it's the note to it in the margin of the Geneva Bible.
So it's not the actual scriptural, it's not the words of scripture of the Hebrew that it was interpreted. It was the notes to the actual verse or verses, or the passage, we might say. Those were the things about the Geneva Bible that James in particular liked the idea. Yes, let us do one big version that is the quote unquote official authorized church version. And then we don't have to have the bishop's Bible versus the Geneva. There's this one, and we go with this one.
Yes.
Am I oversimplifying that, Professor? Or that's okay.
That's fair enough. We're getting into quite good detail there, but it was these sorts of examples that came up. The three verses that Andrewes talked about, that being one of them, all the problems did get sorted out in the King James exactly as they had been in Geneva, but King James didn't have those kind of marginal notes.
Right.
And people kept on bringing up at least two of the texts that Andrewes used sort of 40 years later. They were a commonplace of argument, even though the argument had been won and lost, whichever way you like to look at it.
Okay.
So that, by the way, that dislike of the annotations led to one particular characteristic of the King James. The king said, no annotations except for explication of the language, if there is anything particular there. But so it could not have any controversial notes in it. The translators could put that in, and they could put in cross-references, but no more than that.
You can watch the rest of Nick's interview with David Norton on the Center for Christian History website at centerforchristianhistory.com. This Week in Christian History is produced for the Center for Christian History by Blue and Gold Media at Mississippi College, in cooperation with the MC Department of Communication. For episode transcripts and more information, visit centerforchristianhistory.com. Be sure to subscribe on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and follow the Center for Christian History on Facebook at the Center for Christian History, and on Instagram at Christ Hist Today. That's ChristHistToday. Our next podcast episode is coming next week. Thank you for listening.